Greetings, everyone. Today is Monday, September 21st, and here's today's Monday Morning Minute. And before we get started, I just want to say that I personally am so thankful for fresh and clean air, and I hope that it has made its way up to you wherever you are. And man, my mood has been just so much better being able to inhale and exhale freely outside. So I hope that that has brought a little bit of reprieve to you all, again, wherever you are. Okay, so for today, we're going to start off with some housekeeping, and I want to walk you through how I've reorganized our content within Blackboard. Then we'll talk about last week's readings, thinking about building positive relationships between you, the teacher, and your students, and also what you all talked about in critical response number 1. We'll then talk about this week's readings, thinking about building positive peer relationships. I want to touch on our first major assignment called the Teaching Metaphor Project, and that's due on October 11th. And then finally, I want to walk you through this week's critical response, number 2, and talk you through the prompts. Okay, so first of all, content in our Blackboard course has a new look, and let me share that with you. I'm going to toggle over there. So here's our lovely Blackboard page. Nothing looks too different from here, but when you click content in the left-hand menu bar, you will see some changes. So first of all, I've taken away the view of the course calendar where you could kind of see it immediately and scroll through it. That document is still here. It is still very much alive. Simply click on the very first web link here, and you will see that course calendar document. This will be continually updated if we need to make changes. All the hyperlinks are there and are active. So if this is your preferred way to access our material and keep track of it, please continue to do that. You can bookmark this page. That's totally fine. Use it as you need to. However, we had heard as an MITe program committee that there's been a lot of confusion about what's due when, and how to access work, and how to know what's due again, and what you're supposed to be reading and where can you find those readings. And we know that on top of everything else this semester has just caused a lot of undue stress. And we're here to support you, and we're here to ensure that you are able to easily access the basic materials that you need to be successful in this class. So if that means reorganizing courses, rethinking course design, that's something that we're all really happy to think through. I've made a couple of very covert changes to later parts of our syllabus or our course calendar in order to maybe cut out some readings here and there, again, because I want to make sure that this class is as streamlined and seamless for you all as possible, given the very unique circumstances of fall 2020. So for another sort of alternate view and way to access all of our course materials is through these content folders. We'd heard that this is a way that works for a lot of you, that maybe you've seen in your other classes, and so I'm adopting it here as well. So starting with week 5, where we are, notice on the outside of the folder we have the course topics, the readings and media, just an overview, and assignments. And then when you click in the folder, you will see there will be separate folders for the readings or the media. And here, these are all the web links you need for all of the required readings this week. And then for every critical response week, I've just included here a course link for you all. This will take you right to our critical response group. So again, whichever critical response group that you are a part of, you'll go right there. And then navigating from the small group to the group discussion board to the appropriate forum for that critical response. You can also get there through the link at left, right under assignments, critical response groups. That's still there. That'll take you there. But again, if it's easier to kind of keep everything organized this way, I thought that might be helpful. So again, this is all updated for the rest of the semester this way, but the old way is still there if you need it. And to that end too, I'm happy to redesign other aspects of the course as well, but please let me know what's not working for you. Even if it's just kind of a mild annoyance, you can let me know. I will be sending out a mid-semester course evaluation in a couple weeks, probably middle of October, and I'm so eager to hear about your experiences thus far. But please know, I'm continually soliciting feedback, so it is always welcome, and I'm happy to learn what I can do to make this class just run a little bit more smoothly for you all. Okay, so moving on, I'd like to also talk, kind of throw back to last week when we were talking about developing positive student-teacher relationships. So as the educator, making sure that you have a positive relationship with every individual student. And to this end, we read Jones and Jones chapter 3, and we also looked at that Rita Pierson TED Talk, which was universally adored. And I understand why. I love that video as well, and I'm glad that it resonated so deeply with so many of you. Okay, so something I like to do in these videos is to draw out some interesting ideas that were, kind of shared within our small groups and to bring them to the whole group. So we'll start today with Kennedy, who wrote, Jones and Jones mentioned that we should have a healthy openness with students, that we should let our students know that we are real people, but only talk about our thoughts and feelings toward school-related things. This is not happening in the classroom that I am observing. One teacher quietly holds her baby out of screen view and talks about her often. The other mentions her cats. They handle things professionally, but the students know they are real people. And I just want to say that I welcome every and all sort of counter example that you observe, in comparison with what we're reading. There can often be a large divide between teacher education programs, such as the one that you're in, and the research and the theory that you learn there, and the practices that you see, with live students in the classroom. And I think it's important to kind of bridge that gap and at least to acknowledge it. And so here Kennedy is talking about how, Jones and Jones are saying, okay, open up a little, but maybe not, very much. And yet, this is a moment that calls for a lot of changes. It calls for a lot of flexibility. So I think it's completely appropriate that we're being honest and transparent with our students, especially because now we're learning at home, right? At home, where we have additional responsibilities. We are caregivers, we are siblings, perhaps we are parents, perhaps we are workers, like we have other jobs that we're trying to attend to as we're trying to work with students. So I think that that's completely appropriate to be real people and to acknowledge the uniqueness of the situation. So thank you to Kennedy for bringing that up, right? Jones and Jones, just because they say something doesn't mean that it's gospel. And in fact, you'll see and observe so many different ways to achieve that same goal of relationship building. So again, thank you to Kennedy. And Julie Z wrote, I have witnessed that if students are recognized for their achievements, they are more engaged and motivated to learn. I also want to add that I have never received a smiley face on a paper that I did not do too great on. I think that Rita Pierson's story of putting a smiley face on a student's paper who received a 2 out of 20 is a great way to build encouragement and redirect the focus of the 2 correct answers rather than the ones missed. I know I want to use lots of stickers in my classroom to build motivation and encouragement. I'm someone who's a huge fan of stickers, and just the idea of using lots of stickers in order to foster encouragement is truly exciting. And additionally, I think Julie is drawing our attention here to what some have called an asset-based pedagogy or asset-oriented pedagogy. And here we have Rita Pierson describing how she, in order to build that relationship with a student, you got to meet them where they are. And if they have 2 correct answers, if they have 1 correct answer, maybe if they have no correct answers, like what can we celebrate within that? Even if it's something small, like, okay, 0 out of 20, we know that this went over your head, or there was nothing here that was kind of taken in by you. However, that means that there's lots more to learn, right? Even more for us to learn together. And that framing, I think, is so key. And I'm glad that Julie brought our attention to it, and that you all, again, really liked the Pierson talk. Okay, so last week we talked about, as a teacher, building individual relationships with students. This week we're looking at how to foster positive peer relationships among our students. And we have two relatively brief readings toward this end. The first is by Thomas Jackson, and it's called P4C Hawaiian Style. Now, full disclosure, I studied with Thomas Jackson. He goes by Dr. J. He's in the philosophy department at the University of Hawaii, where I got a master's degree. And P4C means philosophy for children. And Dr. J is kind of the head of this pedagogical movement around incorporating little p philosophy into all classrooms as young as pre-K or kindergarten. And it can be a really powerful tool. And so he'll describe how he uses P4C, and I think he paints an interesting picture, and one that maybe not a lot of us have witnessed in schools or experienced in schools ourselves. So as you read this article, I want you to ask yourself how this approach compares or contrasts to other classrooms that you've been in. I think that'll be maybe an interesting point for our discussion. And then also, Jackson brings up a lot of terms that are used within philosophy for children and, explains them all, but I'd love to know as you are reading it, like how you're kind of connecting the dots. So how do features like the community ball that he describes and the magic words contribute to what he calls intellectual safety? So building on these ideas, I have a very short piece through Edutopia by Monero. It's called 10 Powerful Community Building Ideas. And this is kind of a listicle. It's a very, very quick read. And it's also research-based with lots of hyperlinks, which is pretty cool in case you want to learn more. But they start off by citing, for instance, a 2018 study by Cook et al. And this article was interesting in that it just really sought to link the simple act of greeting students when they come in every day with academic achievement, with behavioral issues. And unsurprisingly, they found that simply greeting students had a positive effect on academic engagement, and it had a positive effect in terms of behavior management. So these things really do go hand in hand, right? Community building and this idea of management. So I hope that you enjoy those readings. I want to talk briefly about an upcoming project. It's our big first project, and it's due Sunday, October 11th. It's the Teaching Metaphor Project. So I'm going to toggle us once more to this assignment description. And here, this is drawing on my own interest in the field of cognitive linguistics, and I won't bore you with the details, but essentially the field of cognitive linguistics is exploring the ways in which the metaphors we use every day actually have a really powerful impact and let us know how we kind of see ourselves and our place within society. And so Lakoff and Johnson wrote a book in 1980 called Metaphors We Live By. It's kind of the seminal text of this field. And they contrast this idea that metaphors are actually just flowery language that you might see in poetry. They say we actually all use conceptual metaphors all the time. For instance, a common one is a metaphor of time as money, right? We spend time doing things. We might save time doing things, just as we spend and save money. Another famous one is that arguments are warlike or attacks, right? We can think about defending against something, gaining ground, just as you would in a war. And the point here is that when we position ourselves through these metaphors, often unconsciously, that really has an impact on how we conduct ourselves within that space. And so what I'm asking you to do as novice teachers, as pre-service teachers, folks out in the field, as you're looking forward to your own class, I want you to come up with a metaphor that espouses your own view of teaching and learning, a metaphor for teaching and learning. Now, what I'm asking you to do once you have that metaphor is to write your response to these questions here, these prompts. Does your metaphor frame teaching and learning positively or negatively? How are you positioned within this metaphor? How are students positioned within this metaphor? And does that positioning give them agency? What does this metaphor suggest about how you'll deal with conflicts in the classroom related to students or perhaps colleagues or perhaps families? what does this metaphor suggest about how you're going to ensure that students are meeting their goals? And then finally, kind of zooming out, what does your metaphor suggest is the goal of education? Here, right below in this assignment description, I have a non-example for you all, a counter example. And it's one that, again, it's one that is somewhat subconscious, but one that was communicated to me subconsciously while I was a teacher. I just kind of got the sense that teaching is putting out fires, right? And you might hear teachers say like, oh God, just another fire to put out. And again, if we don't think about that metaphor carefully and we just kind of, just start enacting it, we might realize that that's actually a negative way to approach the classroom. It positions the teacher as the one in charge, and students are the fires, the problems, presumably. It's not a particularly humane view of teaching or learning. It suggests that conflict resolution is going to be top down and not collaborative. There's little emphasis in this putting out fires metaphor on growth or development, right? Success is just putting out those fires as quickly as you can, right? And you've succeeded. And finally, the metaphor suggests that the goal of education is just keeping things under control, right? Stopping fires before they burn out of control. And I'm just realizing now as I'm talking about this, how maybe this is too soon, given all of the wildfires that have happened in our region recently. But hopefully you get the sense that's a counter example. And what I want you to do through this assignment is actually very consciously think about a positive metaphor that resonates with you, one that you can take into the classroom, such that these other ones that are a little maybe more negative and less helpful don't have a chance to take hold. So this is a visual essay that I'm asking you to create. So at minimum, if you're not an artsy person, I'm asking you to, write an essay and maybe a Word doc if that's comfortable for you, and then maybe just put in a couple of pictures that you find that help illustrate that metaphor. Now, if you are an artsy person, feel free to use VoiceThread. I can see this being super powerful with like some images and narration over it. You can use Google Slides, PowerPoint, Prezi. You can make a video. There are other options here, and I'm open to ones that are not even listed here if it's something that is maybe more interesting for you. But again, thinking about the traditional essay format, I'm looking for 500 to 750 words in length, so between 2 and 3 double-spaced pages, or give or take. And if you're doing like a narrated VoiceThread or Prezi, the narration should be about the equivalent of that 500 to 750 words. Please include more than one image that help illustrate this chosen metaphor. And then I want you to address all of the following prompts. These are the exact same as were above earlier in the same document. So again, those are what I'm asking you to reflect on. And then finally, I do want to know how you're interfacing this metaphor that you've chosen with the readings that we've done. So I'm looking for the incorporation of between 3 and 5 readings or media from our course. So talk about those concepts as you're discussing your metaphor. And then here's the grading sheet. Again, this is here. If you have questions, let me know. And this is due October 11th. Okay, and then finally, we have our second critical response this week. Remember, with every critical response, I'm asking that you initially post on Thursday, and then follow up with 2 colleagues by Sunday. So this time, Thursday the 24th is that initial post deadline, and then follow up with your colleagues by end of the day, Sunday the 27th. Okay, and here are the prompts for this week. Thinking about this week's readings and the theme of fostering positive peer relationships among students, which ideas suggested in the readings might you implement in your own classroom and why? So what suggestions, techniques, strategies could you see yourself using and why? And also, what are some other ideas you might have for building peer relationships in the classroom? Perhaps these are coming from what you're observing every day with your mentor teacher. And there were so many great examples shared in last week's critical response forum to that end. So yeah, what ideas are you getting from other places too about building those positive relationships with peers? All right, friends, That's it. I've talked your ear off. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful week, and I'm here if you need me. Bye bye.